So let me let me set the stage first, and then I'm going to invite the panelists up because I don't want them to have to take responsibility for what I'm about to say. Apparently, I didn't get the memo about celebrating the success of revenue management, but I'm very excited to be here talking about this topic because I do believe it's an important one. I wanted to start out by sharing some statistics related to this topic. I am pretty sure that 100% of all of the global rock events have had this topic on the agenda over the last few years. 100% of those events. When I did a search for total hotel revenue management, which is what we used to call total hotel profit optimization, that's how many hits Bing showed. So that's a big number. We've been talking about this a lot. 2001 was the year that Jeanette and I collaborated on the first function space revenue management project, and Sherry Kimes and I published a paper about it. That was 15 years ago. 15 years ago. 1998 was the year that Sherry Kimes published her first paper on food and beverage revenue management. That was nearly 20 years ago. That was the number of searches, of hits when I did a search for total hotel profit optimization. A lot of those were Neil Fagan from Fairmont. He's done a lot of writing on that topic. This is how many pages of my book are actually dedicated to this, so I am responsible. And that's the number of cocktails I had before I put this presentation together, so sorry. But I think the point that I'm trying to make with these statistics is that we've been talking about this topic a lot, and I'm not so sure that we've been executing against it. In fact, I see some really strong analogies between total hotel revenue management and teenage sex, right? Now, everyone's talking about it. No one really knows how to do it. So everyone thinks everyone else is doing it. So everyone claims that they're doing it too. And what has happened is that we've ended up in this scenario where we've now got total hotel revenue optimization management performance strategy. We've made up a bunch of names for this thing over the years, or THROMPS, which is not really a strategy. It sounds like a tropical disease that you pick up from, I don't know. Anyway, the challenge I think that we have is that this has been going on for so long in industry that we're starting to get ourselves, I think, a little bit confused. When you look across the landscape, I did another internet search for definitions. I think we're not exactly sure what this is anymore because we've been talking about it for so long. But I do firmly believe that there's something to this, right? But the problem is, I think we've lost sight of kind of like what it is that we're actually optimizing against here. If you look at those definitions, I mean, is it the hotel as an asset? Do we have to think about optimizing against guests, market segments, a combination of all of these things? I think we with all the discussion and all the hype and not a lot of the execution, we've gotten ourselves a little bit confused about what it is that we should be doing and how that can benefit the organization. So that is why I have a distinguished group of panelists who have been experiencing this in their hotels, who are actually executing against this. And we're going to talk about how we can move from the hype to the actual reality of total hotel profit optimization. Because despite what I just put us all through, I really do believe this is very important, and it is the next evolution of revenue management. So thank you for indulging my industry critique, and let me invite my panelists up who were not responsible for any of that. Okay, so we have James from South Beach Hotels. We have Lee Min from Marina Bay Sands. And we have Catherine Bala from Ideas. So come on up, guys. Okay. And Fabian, you'll keep us honest with time, right? Okay, great. Oh, yeah. Sure. Okay. No, yeah. All right, so we've got microphones here. Okay.
Hello.
think I'd like to start out the discussion with these folks on the stage by just maybe asking each of you if you could talk about what this concept of total profit optimization means to you, and give us maybe a broad sense of how you're taking action on that in your business. So James, if we could start with you.
Good morning, everyone. Probably I think I'm the odd one out, being a finance guy here. So for profit, I think most of you go through your school, it's very simple definition. Profit is equal revenue minus cost. That's where you get a profit. But for hotel, it's slightly complicated, especially you talk about revenue management. We have two parts of the profit. One is room profit, one is F&B profit. I think many of you work in hotel, you find that often there's a struggle. The rooms divisions or the sales very proudly tell the F&B guys, say, I make 3 times profit than you. So whatever dollar you bring in, you have to discount. Rooms always come first. The next thing we talk about revenue management is talk about inventory management. Essentially, what is the right balance in a hotel between your food and beverage revenue and your room revenue? In particular, in a hotel where you have quite a sizable meeting space. From the owner perspective, real estate is a cost. Whether I have 10,000 square feet in the ballroom versus 30,000 square feet collectively in my guest room, there's a real estate cost. That's one part of it. Second part of it is operating cost. Are we clear that the operating cost for rooms is always lower than F&B? Not really, in absolute term. Because you look at the owner perspective, owner don't just look at GOP or EBITDA. Owner look at net profit. When net profit, you will apply another dimension of the profit to it. That's to say, after your GOP, if your real estate cost, if 90% of the real estate is rooms, 10% is F&B, then you find your total profit equation will change substantially. So that's where I'm very excited. HSMAI is taking a lead in talking about total revenue management, total profit optimization. And I believe there's a lot of development, a lot of space, whether from education perspective. We're also very glad to learn from earlier speaker that in education part, there's a lot we can do, especially like should a sales manager be equipped with the knowledge of revenue management? My personal opinion, you must. Because today, to be an effective, competent sales manager, you must know what is revenue all about.
I think you brought up some good points. Now we have a finance guy at a revenue management conference. I think it's a step, right? But you bring up some good points. I mean, I think part of the challenge with what we're trying to do here with total profit optimization will require thinking about metrics in a different way and looking at information in a way that we haven't before. And that's hard to drive that kind of change, especially if you can't get to the data. So thank you for that. All right, Catherine, total hotel profit optimization. Go.
Yeah, what is it? Okay, so we really think that it's taking a holistic view of your hotel's asset and trying to maximize, obviously, the profit of them as a unit, as a whole. So not looking at the revenues anymore, but looking at the profits of each, and as well looking at the revenues and at not the units individually. So you can as well think about it as looking at each individual guest and as well seeing, how much revenue and how much profit will he or she bring into the asset, the hotel, and then trying to maximize the mix of your guests. That kind of leads us to the other discussion and to your point, saying we don't really know anymore how we should call it. It's kind of the per person, pricing. Should we kind of have individual pricing? Should we have, optimization just each guest individually, which kind of is as well part of that discussion.
Getting lost in the details as opposed to focusing on execution, right? Yeah.
And I guess, what does our organization do? I guess we have a little bit of an harder and a little bit of an easier way, because, we don't do it. We are the system provider here. So the harder part is kind of coming up with the algorithms, et cetera, which I will not talk about because that is the hard part, which we leave to the mathematicians. But it's really coming up with the products that the companies and the hotels can use to make that easier, because it's not an easy thing to do in your hotels. There are so many challenges that you have to overcome, and one part of it is the data, as we already talked about. What metrics should we look at? It is as well the education front, so where Ideas is spending a lot of time on, both on developing services, but as well on just educating the industry on just what is total hotel revenue management. How can you start doing the little steps instead of just saying, oh yes, we're going to get a system and we implement it, which most probably in most organizations will fail anyway, because that's not the way you should do it. You should have the basics right before you can, do all that stuff. So it's, it's really taking both education, services, as well as having systems and products available to then implement it into the organizations.
Yeah, I mean, that's always felt like a chicken and egg argument for me. I think part of the reason why we haven't moved forward in this in 20 years is because there's this sense that we need to wait around for the perfect system to come and pull everything together, right, and optimize. And we have to stop waiting for that, because
no, you got it
all
already.
Apologies. Yeah, I'm not so sure that exists yet. And it's very complicated to build, and it's going to really depend when you start talking about these different assets, and Lehman is definitely going to be able to comment on this. That varies by the property, by what you have available, by your business mix. And so the perfect system, is probably not there. Certainly isn't there today. I think it has to be part of the culture first, and then the system evolves from that. So. A good point. I'll get off my soapbox because I think we'd much rather hear from Lehman. Thank you, by the way, for having us in your beautiful facility. Those 5 drinks came from your rooftop bar, by the way. So, but anyway, yeah. So total profit optimization from Marina Bay Sands.
Good morning, everyone. So I guess I'll share with you a little bit about when I was preparing for this topic. When they told me that I have to talk about total profit optimization, I was a bit nervous, because I was like, oh, I need to go and research what the industry is doing, and then I need to show you how MBS is doing it better. and then
Picked the right panelist, did we not?
and then I was a bit horrified, or even more nervous, because there was like Neil Fegan's article in 2012, and then Kelly's article, and another article from Temi from Rainmaker. And that was all the literature we had out there. So I was like, oh, okay, so I'm going to walk into a crowd and tell them a little bit about what we do without getting fired. And I really think that the team here that we have at Marina Bay Sands, a lot of credit goes to the leaders that we have, Monique Thacker, which you're all very familiar with, and Fani Swanepoel, which is our current VP. They are the ones that drive this whole strategy. So the reason why I'm representing us is because nobody wants to wake up so early. So I'm gonna, so I'll just share with you a little bit about our journey. So when I joined Marina Bay Sands, it was about maybe almost 5 years ago. We started, it was always been drilled into me that we're optimizing revenue based on profit, from a very simple perspective. Amongst market segments, do you give web, do you give OTAs? It's a very fundamental concept, and we were doing it like all the time. It was well facilitated within our forecasting tools. It was well facilitated within our processes, how we looked at groups, whether or not the groups brought in ancillary MICE business. It was really important that we would have to sacrifice a little bit on the group rate to benefit the MICE, right? So that was really something that we did from day one. But sometime in 2013, we realized that we weren't really doing a very good job. Like we were kind of just skimming the surface in looking at total profitability for the property. So what we did, we embarked on an exercise where we went and calculated total guest value. See, another acronym, but it sounds less like a tropical disease. It does. So total guest value is a really, really simple matrix. We basically looked at room profit for every guest, and we added the ancillary profit. And we mapped this out according to our top 10 source markets by their market segments. Okay, so we did a little matrix where we charted the top 10 source markets at the top by their market segments, and we see the total guest value for every single guest coming in from each source market and each market segment. Based on that, we then use that information to communicate to our marketing colleagues, to communicate to our sales colleagues, and our just anybody who would listen to us.
And probably some that didn't want to, but
yes,
still had to. Yeah.
Yes. And so I think since 2013, we've just constantly refined what we've done. And I think total guest value sounds a lot more catchy, so everybody remembers what it means. And I think now in 2016 is about the third year that we're doing it. It's done a lot in defining our strategy. Just to give you a high level, in case you've not been in Singapore, since 2011 or 2012, we've been a 99% hotel, and we've not stopped. Okay, maybe we're at 98 now, but we're still running at a really high occupancy. And how do we deliver that kind of incremental revenue is not just in maximizing our market segment mix, it's really maximizing that total guest value that we have. And as someone that has practiced it and as someone that has rolled it out through our team, we've done it, and we can say that, we see that it is very successful. We can't imagine anyone not doing it or not taking this approach in maximizing revenue. Yeah.
So it was about, thank you, because it was about for you finding the right metric, the right way to measure, and then sort of communicating that and really managing to that made you successful. And for you all, it was that guest value then. Yeah. I mean, I think it does. There's a theme that comes down to: are we measuring, the right things to execute against this? It's not really about RevPAR anymore when you talk about total profit optimization. The metrics need to change, and that means that people within the organization need to adjust their thinking about what they've been traditionally managing towards and also incentivized on, which is another challenge. What kind of metrics do you track, or you talked a little bit about profitability from these different streams, but when you're having communications in your organization, how are you trying to measure success of some of this?
We do break it down like rooms and F&B. Primarily for rooms, it's very much the conventional of using the market segment. See which are the segment that give you the higher rate and the higher volume, and manage each channel by the segment. I don't think that's different from other hotels. The only difference is the balance between MICE business and room business. How do you manage it? I like very much Li-Ming use of the total guest value. Like for example, a glance of it. You look at this room, easily attract 100 guests into this room. What is the incremental revenue of this 100 delegate bring versus the 100 guests that you need to fill up in the guest room? Probably the 100 guests here, you need 100 guest room. So from a total profit perspective, where do you get most? From the visitor, from the customer, they come to the hotel. I think that's one area there is a lot of development. I think as I mentioned earlier, the current conventional way of how we use the uniform system account have its limitation. In fact, if you're not careful, you do not understand how the uniform system is structured. In fact, it may lead you to some wrong decision making. Like one of the very common thing when you look at it is a forecast, which form a very important part of the revenue management. So in your forecast, how do you decide, how do you maximize your capacity? Like this week is a good example. You look at Food Hotel Asia. You look at Food Hotel Asia, do you say I max up my rooms to the extent that you run the risk of leaving your meeting space empty? Are you compromising that part of the business, which is quite a sizable business? Just the illustration used here. Just in this room, you have 100 people. So what is incremental revenue that you can bring? Of course, it's great that we have tools, all the revenue management tools. But I think that we still have a lot of development space as to how we look at total profit maximization.
Yeah, this is another term that we've now brought into the revenue management world, but this issue of the uniform system of accounts, and is it actually supporting how we need to measure our business? When I was in Europe last month at ROC, that was a topic that came up in a revenue management roundtable, and frankly, I never thought I would be sitting in a revenue management roundtable talking about the uniform system of accounts, but it is driving our ability to truly understand and manage to the metrics that are going to matter as we evolve our thinking. So here we are talking about it again. Catherine, metrics that you all are recommending as you're innovating and building systems in this area?
Well, I guess what you have to look at is metrics for the individual outlets, because I do think there's a lot of work to be done on that. We all are very familiar with, RevPAR, ADR, occupancy, but how do you measure your ballrooms? What number do we look at? Should it be profit per square meter or feet? Should it be per guest? Should it be, or should it be more utilization? Or should we combine it together with the rooms? But then if they only have, the ballroom and not the rooms, how do you do that? And then if you put the spa into the mix and the F&B spend, maybe they have a restaurant or drink 5 cocktails on the bar upstairs.
See, now you're making it sound hard. Again. But I mean, this is the point, right?
But that's the point. It's not so easy. So it's really, you really have to sit down and know what are your outlets, where can you make revenue, first of all, and then map it out individually, and then try to really say, okay, what is the one metrics I should look combining holistically for my entire property, like what Lee Min mentioned. For Marina Bay Sands, it's the total guest value by geographic source and market segment. Now, that might be the perfect thing here, might not be the perfect for some other, hotels out there, maybe because, they don't have so many rooms and run 99% occupancy. I would love to work for that hotel because, it's a revenue management stream.
You're going to have some applications coming in probably after this panel. Just be prepared. There's a lot of good talent out there too, by the way.
So it's really kind of going down the road of understanding your business a bit more, looking at the data as well that you have available, because you can say, oh great, we use this metrics, we were told this is the metrics we should be looking at, but if you don't actually have the data to track it, what do we do with the metrics? You make it up? So it's kind of, as you mentioned, a little bit of the chicken and the egg thing. Start with what you have. Look at the literature that is out there, speak to, industry, advisors and leaders. Try to figure out, okay, what they are proposing to do, and then take what you have now, start analyzing what you have now, start improving the data quality, because what you're going to find out is that the quality of data in non-rooms departments it's not that good, to be polite.
We forget that we've been working with this rooms data. We've tortured that data into submission. It's doing what we tell it to now, and that's even hard, right? But let alone you go out to a new area.
Yeah. So just start small. Start cleaning up your data. Obviously, look at the data so you understand. First of all, okay, my processes and procedures are X, Y, Z. Do I see it in the data? And you will right away see that actually, no, you don't see it in the data, because either the processes and procedures are actually not followed, or they are tracked incorrectly, or both. So it's really, that is as well a step you have to take before you can really decide which metrics you should use in your hotel, for that purpose.
One of the things that struck me about Lehman, when you were saying you did your matrix and then talked about how you were communicating that across the organization and get everyone on the same page. I feel, and I learned this from Jeanette and Neil, I think at Fairmont and some of their efforts and Neil's articles and conversations, that the first step is evangelizing for that revenue culture within the hotel. So going department by department and helping people understand why this thinking of generating profitable revenue will be so impactful. So what was interesting so revenue management came up with this guest value metric and started talking to marketing about it. I would imagine that the fact that you were talking about guests, which is something marketing really understands, sort of helped facilitate that. But maybe you could talk a little bit about, building those bridges between the departments as you were working together, to build this strategy?
Well, I think at Marina Bay Sands, I'm in a really blessed position, right? The Senior Vice President of Marketing is Monique Thacker, who used to be the VP of Revenue Optimization.
That is a very fair point.
Yes.
Yeah, very fair point.
And in the Senior VP of Operations is Ian Wilson, who's formerly from Fairmont Raffles International, who has a revenue manager background. So I'm really, really in a very blessed position.
She really is. Yeah.
Please do not try to steal my job. But so from a communication perspective, it wasn't easy. I mean, you had to break it down, because when you flash that matrix up, can you imagine how many people's eyes crossed when they saw that? We had to break it down, and we talked about source markets. And the reason why we approached this from a source market perspective is because we've seen in our data from a booking pace perspective, just from booking pace, that different source markets had different booking pace. So from there, are we able to then go drill down a bit more to try to understand why do they have a different booking pace? Why do they stay in different room types? Some source markets have a propensity to stay in higher room categories. Why is that, right? So how do these source markets perceive our property, and how can we maximize revenue for them? So we took that source market angle, and that was far more effective in communicating with marketing, with operations, with sales, because from sales perspective, you plan your sales targets and by regions and by territories. So it was very relevant. And when you do marketing, you decide, okay, I want to put so much money into Japan, I want to put so much money into Australia. So you plan by source markets. So they found this very relevant for them. I mean, it was something very actionable. I think from a matrix perspective, I think that we spend quite a lot of time overthinking things. I don't think people look at revenue managers as a whole and go, you're lazy. I think we're probably, the adjectives people used to describe us is like probably too intense, too absorbed with data, maybe a bit socially awkward. But I mean,
You couldn't tell from actually up here, but
yeah.
that's okay.
But I mean, the thing is, I mean, we're all really hardworking people. We care a lot about the data. So what we have to do is really stop thinking about the matrix, like is it GoPar or whatever. But really, what is successful is that you make more money, right? I mean, it's not about like, what is the matrix? How do you measure this? Are you making more money? If you're not making more money, you failed. You need to move on. I mean, that's my perspective. In terms of communication, I judge how effective my communication has been when I'm discussing something with sales. I'm sorry for the salespeople here. I love you. When I'm discussing something with sales and I'm saying, I don't want to take this group, right? It's not paying enough. And sales argues and debates with me by saying, but the TGV for this group could be very high. I know that my communication has been successful because sales is using it against me. I think that's, from a communication perspective, I'm very sure that I've been very successful. So that's how I measure my interactions. Another good example is, let's say, when I'm in a potential walk situation. So running at such a high occupancy, obviously we have a few scares, and front office is very jittery, and they'll be calling me, and they'll be like, oh my God, Lehman, what are you doing? What are you doing? And if I can tell them, if I can communicate to them, yes, we're in a potential walk, but we had to take some guests with a high TGV. And they're like, yes, do it. That's when I know that we're also very successful. Not just communicating with sales, but also within the operations departments, that they understand that I'm not doing this just to make their life difficult. I'm doing this because I'm trying to make more money for our property. Yeah.
That's very good. I love it. Using your own words against you. That is the dream.